How does one find a spiritual guide in this day and age? This is a common question which people ask. Al-Imam Ibn Ata'illah Al-Iskandari rahimallahu ta'ala, he mentions that when a person proposes to the daughter of a king, he must have a standard himself. You do not go and propose to the daughter of a king with clothes which have excrement. So he states that a person who is looking for a spiritual guide, he must better himself to a standard by which he is able to find such a spiritual guide. What do we have in this day and age? People who do not know ahkamus salah, they do not know how to pray properly, they do not know shurutus salah, arkanus salah, they do not even know the dua qunut in the prayer, in the salatul witr, they do not know nawaqidul wudu, what invalidates your wudu, they do not know basic arkanul Islam. They have years of qada of prayer, years of qada. They have the qada of zakat, they miss the zakatul amwal, they do not pay the zakatul amwal. And similarly, we have people who miss fasting in the month of Ramadan, yet they claim that they are finding a spiritual guide. When they do find a spiritual guide, what do they have? Perhaps the spiritual guide will visit the country once a year. Perhaps they will go to visit the spiritual guide. Sometimes the misguidance is to the point that many of them, they actually do sajda to the peer. This is found that there are people who actually carry out sajda to their spiritual guide. Some of them are so misguided, they will do sajda to the graves. Some of them will do tawaf of the graves. Some of them are misguided to the point that they do not rely upon Al-Quran Al-Kareem for their shifa. They perhaps will go to the person for a ta'weed and believe that ta'weed alone will cure them, not resorting to acting upon the deen of Al-Islam, which is praying the 5 daily prayers, as well as the women wearing hijab. So many times you have the women not dressing appropriately and approaching the Pir Sahib. The so-called Pir Sahib will not command the women to dress modestly in accordance with the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, some of them will wear makeup when approaching the Pir Sahib. They will not cover their faces in accordance with the law of Allah. They will not dress appropriately, and they become misguided. Sometimes and many times the Pir Sahib, a person will spend decades with such a guide, they will not even learn the basic sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will not even learn the attributes of Allah. There are so many people in our community, they have spent years and years with a Pir. The Pir has not instructed them even in the basic sifat of Allah. And even if he does, many times the person will misguide them in other aspects of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this day and age, a person must be careful in terms of isolation, where women are isolated with the Pir, where incidents may occur. Khalwa between a man and woman, which is haram in the Sharia of Allah. If the woman is not related to you, you cannot have khalwa with that woman. But likewise, the misguided peers, they will misguide people with regard to ilm. So many of the murids, people who are students, are never encouraged into entering al-ilm al-sharif, to studying ilm correctly. So many of them have many vulnerabilities. And as I mentioned, one of those vulnerabilities is the case of women. What is a ghair mahram? A mahram, firstly, a mahram is someone you can never marry. A ghair mahram is someone you can marry. It is impermissible for a man to be alone with a woman who is ghair mahram, a man and woman in isolation. A man cannot stay with her alone behind closed doors. Totally prohibited in the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And chuf chuf peer is an ailment of an illness in our community. Such an ailment that if it is not rooted out, if the bid'ah in our community is not rooted out, you will only have the likes of Ali Mirza engineer and the misguided people growing in number, because they misguide people with regard to the real meaning of tasawwuf, the real meaning of real Sufi guides. In this day and age, a person does not need to take bay'ah with a person. It's not essential. What is essential is firstly in aqeedah to have correct belief. After correct belief, firstly you cannot blind follow, you cannot do taqleed in aqeedah of a modern person. When you follow the Quran and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is not deemed taqleed. If you ask someone, why do you believe in this, and he responds with a verse of the Quran, that is not taqleed. If you ask them, why do you believe in this, and they respond with a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is not taqleed. Taqleed is that when your peer becomes misguided, you become misguided with him. That is real taqleed. That is totally impermissible. We have false peers within the UK informing their murids that taqleed in aqeedah is permitted. This position has never been established in the books of ilmul kalam. That taqleed, meaning it's qawl marjuh, it's not permissible.